you subscribe to Pando?
That's so hot.
All right. Hey, what's up, guys? Yeah, Randa, thanks for the sub. I'm gonna mute the sub stuff though, because it's gonna otherwise it's gonna be weird on the podcast and shit like this, and it's gonna distract me, right? But let me introduce Jin'taan. I think most people, I'd be surprised if someone's here who doesn't know Jin'taan, but there might be someone listening in who doesn't know, right? There's a couple achievements already. So XCSM is one thing. I mean, how many terms? 3?
I served for 3 years, yeah.
Yeah. 3 terms CSM, which is an achievement in itself already, but then also AT commentator, correct?
Yeah, 3 times.
Also 3 times.
Yeah. I was the military director of Providence for about 2.5 years.
That too, yeah. I think that's what we the group most people probably connect you with. You also ex in it, not for too long, right? You tried it out, didn't quite work out. We can talk about that later, but you know, I think it was just not the play style you were looking for at the time. But you can explain, I guess. And now you're mostly running NPSI fleets with Spectre fleets while you're doing your stuff on YouTube, right? Like that's mostly EVE politics updates, but more on politics updates. That pretty much nails it, I guess.
Yeah, what I try and do is I try and just keep people updated with what's going on in the game in a relatively timely fashion. I'll cover patches, I'll cover the politics, I'll cover individual big fights like 9TAC4 back in the day. Just try and keep people who aren't actively playing in the game in touch with what's going on and providing something digestible for people who need it.
And you know what? I think sometimes even people involved in the thing you cover might just get some intel or info out of the whole thing, especially line members. I mean, I know for sure like some conflicts we might have third partied in or whatever we don't have too much interest in. So I'm not fully up to date, but then you update it and I can tell like, oh, that's what's actually happening, right? Even though I have been in the fight, I don't even know what exactly was happening. So
yeah,
and then
people seem to be people are generally pretty open with it after the fight's gone down. So you can get some of those really cool, like intricate details, and I love being able to bring those to the forefront. They're like human mistakes or little human moments that end up turning into gigantic tactical things that turn a fight.
you know what? That was always one thing that surprised me a little bit, is that people are so open, right? For example, talking in stations, they don't have really problems getting all the FCs on there. Like pretty much everyone they want to talk to would get on, and everyone who you want to talk to, they would talk to you, right? Like in general, people are pretty open actually. So yeah.
Well, I mean, us FCs tend to be a bit of an egotistical sort, so I think part of that's just us all wanting our time in the limelight.
That is true. I'm not gonna deny I've got an ego too, but I hope it usually isn't, isn't getting in the way sometimes. For some people it is probably, but what you're gonna do.
Yeah. But yeah, as you mentioned, I've recently moved over to flying mostly with Spectre Fleet and just enjoying some NPSI stuff. And that's just because and that's not because I've stopped enjoying the large alliances. I just haven't been a part of one for a good while. I've been in Brave Newbies, been doing some roaming there, but I just can't stop FCing. Like FCing is, I swear to God, it's like the most addictive part of EVE Online gameplay, and it has ruined every other MMO that I've ever tried to play because nothing compares to FCing. There is no other gameplay like it in any other video game. Like the only thing that could maybe come close to it is, to me, sometimes is games like RimWorld. If you could have like a RimWorld that's scaled up to 100 people, you're managing so many individuals, and every little thing that you do matters to an insane degree. And it's almost like playing an RTS, but all of the units argue with you. Like it's unreal. Like I can't stop doing it, even when I'm like, I don't really have a reason to FC. I don't have any objectives to defend. I'm not being paid to do this anymore. Every week, I'm like, I still want to go and like run some Feroxes into Headliner and die to him.
Yep. The thing about FCN, it also ruins not only ruins like other MMOs, it also ruins being in someone else's fleet. I feel like I struggle a lot when I'm joining someone, like yesterday, like last night actually. I joined someone else's fleet, and then I join like other roles. For example, last night I like to do the Logi thing then, just to get a feel for the Logi part, because I usually don't get that chance. But like I struggle to even stay engaged, you know what I mean? I mean, it was also late, but at the same time, it is super hard. If you're used to like, I mean, you probably have seen this the same way. You have like one main and at least one alt going on, right? Like a scout or something, right? That's like what everyone does, basically.
That's I actually don't do that in my NPSI fleets. I'll be honest with you. I've actually just tried to make it as casual as possible, and more than that, what I've tried to do is I've tried to put those roles like scouting or even anchoring, give those to people in the fleet and like try and help them learn a bit. because I think that's something that people don't do enough with NPSI fleets, is try and train the people around you and make them better. So that's something that I've been trying to focus on a bit in my NPSI stuff. And it's been very fun. People have been really receptive to it, and we've had some great victories with people who've just learned through a very, very low barrier of entry FCing place to FC.
Yeah, I mean, it's not only good for them, I guess. It's also good in general if you train some people up that can do anchoring and all that stuff. Anchoring, target calling, that's all things you really like. At the end of the day, you really don't need to do that much as an FC. You need to have the the grand picture, so to say. Like, you have to have the strategy in mind or the tactic. So it also helps get your fleet better, right? Because like if you do all of these things alone, you can't be 100%. It's impossible, right? So some really good FCs that are good at this multitasking stuff, they might reach the 90%, but you'll never have 100, right? So yeah,
it's basically the, like, I do think that's actually an important point to make, that you don't need to anchor or even target call to FC. You could very easily, I'm sure you've actually done it multiple times, where you've FC'd a fleet where you have done none of the anchoring, none of the target calling, but all you've done is positioned your fleet. You've gotten to the right point in the engagement. You've laid out the game plan. You've communicated between all of the parts of your fleet properly, and from there, everything's just been able to play out. And I think a lot of people don't see FCing that way. They see it as this very monolithic, there's one guy who's in charge, he does everything, he is the savior and the bringer of victory. But there's a whole big network that goes into that, and people don't give it enough recognition or even understand that it exists as something that you can interface with and learn from. More to the point, because I always get these messages from people who are like, how do I learn how to FC? How do I get started with FCing? And I've always directed people to, like, hey, ask one of your FCs, like, hey, can I be a target caller, or can I back up anchor, or can I scout? All those kind of things will help get you into the position to eventually be a trusted FC.
I mean, you've been there. You've been in it during Rage, right? So I actually got you involved early, which most people don't know. Like, you just joined maybe a month before or so. So I thought, okay, he's an experienced FC, might just get him on board, and
And I was in charge during the one time they got a fleet actually into the hole as well. So you made an excellent choice there.
Spy confirmed, right? But you saw it right there too. Like, I wasn't even actively anchoring the fleet on the Keepster, because like I would get headshot anyway, right? So there was always someone taking over right away. So I was just there to get headshot, which kind of sucks, But
you were managing the communication though. You didn't even need to be on grid at a certain point. You were asking things like, hey, how many execuras do we have left? All that kind of thing that's really important when you're in the moment, but you're not going to be thinking about it as a line member.
Yep. And I mean, I think people, like those FCs that then take those little tasks, they have like a way better chance of actually also reaching for more than, they get a little bit hungry then. For example, Piercy was one of the FCs we had in Rage who was doing my backup anchoring. He actually at the moment is deployed, but he's coming back actually this weekend, I believe. So happy to see him around again. But yeah, you could tell he was reaching for more than, right? He got hungry, I felt like. That was a cool thing to see. And then we promoted him, and I even gave him a little bit of a tiny speech at the end and stuff. It was kind of fun. But yeah,
it is lovely to see people like eventually realize the fact that they can be self-actualized in EVE Online. Like that's another one of the greatest things about FCing, is you get to go out and decide, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this happen. And you can absolutely just make massive things happen by shooting a couple of Astra houses. It's pretty rad. That's the state the game is in right now.
And it's one of the questions I like have like always lined up for people that come on here, is like, why do you start FCing? I feel like for most people the answer is always necessity. But that's not the full truth if you think about it, right? What you just said, it's always the little bit of like I want to do this, but I don't have an FC for it, so I kind of have to do this myself, you know. So that's always a little bit of a part of it. So you know, and sometimes I feel like I wonder sometimes how many FCs had an idea, they go out and do it, they fail the first time, and then they give up. There must have been a lot of them, right?
Oh, there's so many. I tried for a while to like breed more FCs during my time in Providence. Like I actually set up a program and tried to track people through it, and I gave up after like 3 months because holy shit, it was fucking brutal. Like you had a 50% initial wipe rate. Like if someone went out and ran a fleet, there was just like a 50% chance they would never run a fleet again. People would be like, cool, I've done it now. Never have to do it again. I can say I'm an FC. I can say I have FC'd full stop. And that was about as much dedication as they had to it. And you know, you watch how many people will keep going after their first whelp, even if it's all covered by SRP. You know, there is pretty natural to feel like kind of guilty that you lost that much ISK in your first fight or whatever. You feel kind of responsible for that. And it takes a certain kind of person to battle through that and go and run a second time and a third time and hundreds of times probably now that I've run fleets here in 2020. Yeah. I mean, shit, I've been FCing for nearly 10 years now.
Yeah, I don't even know how long I've been FCing. Maybe six, yeah. But I remember the first like big fleets with like a lot of prep. Dude, you get nervous at the beginning, right? You get nervous. It's not a good feeling, right? It's like, oh shit, if I fail and stuff like this. And then if you fail, that's not gonna help you to go out the next time because it was already felt shit before anything happened, right? So you don't want to feel like nervous or anything. But you know, I think what helps a lot is like if you keep going, like it's impossible to not succeed at some point. You know what I mean? That's like even if you're the dumbest guy ever, like if you take out the right doctrine, you know, I mean, some people fail right there. They take out the wrong stuff, but if you take out like a Hecate fleet, you can fly around with 10 Hecates. You will find that one perfect target, and everyone's gonna have a blast. And then you know you can build on that. And as soon as you have that trust of people, you don't feel that nervous anymore. Like you don't have to worry about anything then, right?
Honestly, like these days, thanks to filaments and stuff, I think the barrier of entry is even lower. Like you can just zip over to that Calavella Expanse or whatever and deal with Hord's home defense fleet with like 20 dudes and caracals, and you'll have a good time. Like you will die. Yep. You will 100% die, but you'll kill a lot of stuff before you do. And that's great. I like that. I like that it is a bit more simple. And that's why I moved to NPSI as well, because it is just, hey, I'm running a fleet here. People get their ships there. We go out. No one expects to like have some glorious victory. People just want the raw content, and that's just a great environment to be learning. And that's especially good for me because I spent like I've probably spent 6 months to a year out of FC from the time I finished the CSM and the time I kind of dropped out of I dropped into like Tribute, and I was going to do some stuff there, but eventually I just couldn't get into it for some reason. And because of that, my skills are now incredibly rusty, and I've had to sit there and just relearn all of the basics. And it's surprising how much simple stuff you forget. Like, oh my God, engaging is literally 80% of how you win fights. And, you know, fleet compositions are super important, and being able to understand what all parts of your fleet are doing at any point is crucial. Those kind of things. You know, and that's why I've started making those FCing videos again, because I thought that relearning some of those basic lessons might be useful for people to sit down and watch and kind of absorb from the perspective of someone who is literally making those mistakes for you, so you can see what to not do.
Yeah, you just have the advantage. You already know. You already know, like you'll get there. You know what I mean? You already know, like it's a process, and you'll get there. Yeah. But at the same time, I've got a little bit of a series going on too, because for the longest time now, like I would say the last half a year or so, I focused almost entirely on like the hunting stuff, right? With Stukas and then with Kikis, like just hunting big stuff. and having like 200 people in fleet and all that stuff. And then now that there's less people to hunt for us, I kind of went back to what we used to do all the time, is just with corp, 10, maybe 15, now like 25 men because of filaments, but smaller fleets, just focused on like getting every fight we can find and then potentially trading well or even winning the fight. And the first couple of fleets, or like there were a few in those, like I think I'm at like episode number 10 or so with the specific config. There was a couple in those where I thought like, oh shit, like lessons that I should have learned years ago, you know, that I had to relearn. Like when to simply say, okay, we have to warp out and not take this fight, or simply move the fight a couple gates, you know, just a few gates, and then you might just have a better situation for yourself. And give a little bit more urgency to hostiles, because, oh no, they're about to leave, we have to catch them, right? And then they make mistakes instead of just sitting there waiting for them to come and fucking blob you, you know? And that's like all these little things, you know, or like lazy scouting. It doesn't really work in smaller fleets. You know, you can't be lazy with the scouting. You're not invincible, you know what I mean? You have to know, you know, what's going on exactly and stuff. You have to be a bit more careful. It's like all
it's a very different kind of intel landscape to what you're doing with when you're hunting, because when you're hunting you've got to manage like
everything is a target.
Here are 8 different routes that we have to take, let's make sure that those are clear when we eventually find a target. Whereas you're the target when you're running a 20-man fleet.
Exactly.
You've got to make sure that those 8 people don't fucking find you.
Yeah. It's exactly what it is, I think, right? It's the mindset of hunting, and like suddenly it's turned around. Like we're kind of hunting though, right? You filament out, which is great. Like the filaments, I can't praise them enough, right? I think they nailed it with them. They really did. And so you filament out, and then you're kind of hunting for a while, but there's a clock ticking, right? Like after 10 minutes, you're the prey, you're getting hunted, right? Like after 10 minutes, kind of, you're in intel, someone's forming. So you have to switch that mindset, and I wasn't always successful with that, but like I'm getting there too.
I'm the worst though, because I will always play with the response fleet. I can't not do it. Like I want to sit at 100 kilometers and watch their tackles stream into me and try and kill 2 of them. It doesn't matter that I'm risking the entire fleet. I'm still going to do it every time.
Yeah, I mean, the config we're flying, we call it LARS, Large Ancillary Mode Shield Boosters, right? So
oh dude, those are sick though.
I think you have been on one of those before.
I haven't, but I'm totally with the Ansel remote shield boosters, because people don't realize that they don't use any cap. Like exactly. I was using them for a while on a bunch of fittings. I think I used like a medium Ansel on one of our scythe fittings so that we could get like more tank out of it. Stuff like that. Yeah,
so I thought maybe you would have been on one of the, like we've done it like years ago on a bigger scale. Well, not years, but maybe a year, like 1.5 or so ago. And that could have been when you weren't in it. We used them on like Vexors on a bigger scale. And
I definitely was really in a Vexor fleet.
Yeah, that might have been the one.
Maybe it was that way. Yeah,
and then CO2 actually engaged us with like, I think we had 70 and they had like 120 ruptures, which is alpha damage. Is not usually, but we killed them all, and it was just like glorious. But we're flying them in smaller scale now because of the filaments, 25, right? And they work really well, but we upgraded to Gilas now. They're just way stronger, right? And yeah. They perform really well. So I'm playing around with another step actually. So the series actually that I was talking about was first Vexors, then Vexor Navy issues, then Gilas. Then I wanted to I was thinking about Ishtars, but I think they're not as strong in that comp.
Not using a Guardian Vexor, you coward.
Well, hey, if you want to borrow me yours, like I'd take yours then.
I'm nowhere near rich enough to have a Guardian Vexor, sadly. But
I actually know someone who has one.
Did you see the kill mail? It was like a couple of years ago, but someone actually lost a Guardian Vexor in a fucking Iteron 5.
Oh my god! Hey, as long as they don't lose them in fucking high sec in some citadel right now, right?
Yeah, I
We
was.
can talk about that one, huh?
Hey, yeah, I've made my thoughts about it pretty clear. Like, I'm very happy with the actual change. Like, the actual mechanics that have been introduced are the way Citadel should have been introduced to the fucking game.
Yeah.
I'm on record as saying that. I've said that to CCP originally. I basically called for something like this when I was on the CSM, but the execution of this is fucking terrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
you know what?
It's just so recklessly, like, so recklessly implemented for those players who aren't active in the game right now. That's just all it comes down to. And I don't get this. I don't get this like weird backlash that's been going on Twitter from people like Manic and Ashtarothi who are like, "Oh, you know, it's fine. Just play the game, lol." You know, not realizing that that comes from an incredibly privileged position.
I have to say though, my first reaction was like, what's the actual damage right now, right? A few people will lose a shit ton of stuff. Like, and I still think the damage it's not the end of the world, you know? But for those few people, like, did we really need that? Did we need to have that shit drop and then drop it into the hands of someone else? Like,
also the fact that people were scouting all that shit on Sissy beforehand. Like the fact that people
yes.
knew what was good, knew what to hit, and that there was no warning to the people of that, and that just really strikes me as exploity. And I genuinely think that the people who actually went and hunted for that stuff on Sissy should be banned. I just think they should be banned.
Oh, I think you're going too far there. I think it's not their fault.
Not permanently, obviously, but no, that is good. That goes straight.
I'm not a fan of banning anyway.
I know you aren't, but I'm going to go there. I think it was against the Sissy rules.
If it's
at the very least, they should. Yeah, at the very least, they should have their Sissy access permanently revoked. Something like that is a minimum. But CCP is never going to go through the effort of actually tracking all that down in the database. So.
I like the Sissy access approach. Like if someone does that, boom, they lose Sissy access.
Yeah,
I get behind that, but in general, I think that's the thing with Citadels in general. Whatever they do, they always like started a little bit wacky. You know, Citadels when they got introduced in the first place, holy shit, was that?
You remember vulnerability windows? Weren't those fun?
I remember the day they came out, and I was like, this can't be true, right? Like the tether range is massive. You can anchor them and have bubbles right on them, so people get dragged from.
Remember when there wasn't initial anchoring time, and there was literally no way to stop someone from just anchoring a structure in front of you? Hey. Remember how fun and interactive that was as a game mechanic?
in general, like, and then asset safety on top of that, you know. And
good lord,
like this whole combination of Citadels, it came across like super rushed. And I have to wonder, I don't want to call anyone from CCP out or anything, but I have to wonder if that's the same team doing those changes right now. Because I believe they need help. I mean, you know, I didn't mean it to come across like this, but you know what I mean. They need some real player advice, and they should consider talking more to the CSM. And I believe if they would have consulted the CSM properly, they would have gotten the right answers. Give them more time to think about stuff. Citadels are complex. You can't just clap your hands and they're going to be fine, right?
Oh god, it's so like we get so much blame on the CSM for a lot of the early structure stuff. I don't think people realize that you get told those mechanics in about a 30-minute presentation where you don't have like printouts of everything in front of you. So you've just got to remember everything that this person is downloading to you after 3 days of doing this to other projects. And then you have to, in that other 30 minutes that you have left, you have to then explain everything that you possibly can that's fucked up about that design. And that is the only time you get. It's absolutely awful. It's like a continuous 32-hour job interview. Like, that's the only thing I can, like, kind of compare the stress to. It's great, and like the catharsis after it's all done and you go drinking is wonderful, and I'm happy I spent the time in it, but holy shit, it is not easy.
Yeah, and people ask me like, Panda, why aren't you running for CSM? Like, dude, you have no idea.
I would not recommend that anyone run for the CSM. No. there is a half-written script that I've been kicking around for like about a year and a half called "Why You Shouldn't Run for the CSM," and it's just like
Well,
all the
now is the
reasons
perfect
why-
time, right?
Yeah, probably. If people
Right
probably
after,
think-
you're like, too late, dudes. Is there like one CSM guy you have like great hopes in that like who is doing like good there? Who was your number one?
My number one whilst I was on there. That changed pretty rapidly depending on the summits, but I think Suetonia. It would be between
wait.
Suetonia and Aerith over the course of my 3 years. Probably had the most positive impact.
Oh, Aerith. That's a surprise.
I know Aerith is going to be a surprise for a lot of people, but Aerith was someone who could see a lot of economic problems before they happened that I don't think he even got enough credit for within the CSM during his time there. Like, he was the kind of person who would just point out, oh, well, I can trade this to this and use this obscure mechanic, and now I have infinite ISK. You should probably fix that. You know, he was the guy bringing all the broken stuff that the Goon Cabal, Economic Cabal, or whatever they call it these days, came up with, and feeding that to CCP. That he pointed out all of the insurance fraud, for example, that they were doing. You know, for everything that he gets about being quite possibly the most egotistical human being that I've ever had the time to spend that I've ever spent time in the presence of, he did care about the game, and he did try and do good by it, and he did very good by it.
Oh, that's glad to. I never talked to the guy, but yeah, that's the impression I had. Always like, oof, that dude has an ego. Holy shit! But yeah, he didn't make it a secret either, so he can't be mad for people picking it up like that.
No.
But then also like, who do you think? Or actually, what I wanted to say is, I think now that Aerith isn't here, Kenneth Feld is maybe or hopefully filling that gap. And as far as I could tell, he seems to be in like level-headed and stuff. So I hope he's gonna fill that gap.
Yeah.
And so they still have someone with like industry experience, like solid industry experience and stuff. Because like if I was on the CSM and they would ask me, like, I have no idea, you know.
Losing Steve's another big thing there. Like, that does suck. Like, Steve was such a source of institutional knowledge for the CSM. Just because he'd been there for 6 years, he knew who was in charge of a lot of things, and you could go to him. And you know, even if he wasn't super active, he actually was really active in stuff like dealing with the tech co, which is like the API side of things, and he was always kind of this advocate for high sec and also the casual player. So I hope that we can eventually get someone like that back on the CSM, someone who's there to be an advocate for the more casual players. Torvald seems like he's aiming to fill that gap, but I don't know how successful it will be. And he's also advocating for a lot of other things, so I think it's unfair to put that on his back entirely.
Yeah, so for like, I think for high sec stuff, we've got Mike Azaria, right? Who's doing like newbie stuff, but he has a lot of experience with like all kinds of stuff. So
that's true.
I think in general, that's what I said when I did the post-election kind of thing. I think in general, the CSM we got is fairly diverse, even if it doesn't look like it necessarily, right? Because like Kenneth Feld, for example, he looks like a null block candidate, but see, like if you look at it, you have to put him in the industry category, right? Then you have like for example, what's his name, Torvald. He's doing the
abyssals and stuff like that.
Abyssal casual stuff. You have one Chinese candidate, which I don't know if that's going to be useful or not, but it for sure could be useful to find out. You know what I mean? So, you know,
I imagine they will probably be presenting many of the same concerns that Sword Dragon presented to the CSM during CSM 13.
Which was?
Kind of just basically like, hey, can you let us use the can you just like disable the stuff that you have that means that we can't use the hacked Chinese version of the TQ client, please? And then CCP will say, no, fuck you. And that'll be the end of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, but like, you know, they have to unfortunately abide by the rules that are set by Communist China, who are not known for being the most permissive bunch, it turns out.
Yeah, I wonder if that's ever going to change. Probably not in our lifetimes.
That is far beyond the reach of an FCing podcast.
Let's dive into this.
I guess I do. Have some experience in politics, but not that kind of politics.
I mean, Helma always likes to say, it's like a real life experience. So why not, right? Maybe EFFC should rule the world. Who knows? I mean, what would we get? I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe EVE Online's secretly the training center for the next generation of Battlefleet commanders or something like that. Like the movie The Last Starfighter. I don't know if you've ever watched that.
No, I didn't.
It's like an old 70s 80s sci-fi movie where the main character is really good at an arcade, and it turns out the arcade is actually just a simulator to find the best starfighter in the world. He goes off and fights aliens. I'm a nerd, okay?
You know what? Like another thing I was talking about, actually, Miranda Lorian, who's in Twitch chat, she is involved with the US Army esports team and stuff. And what I always think is like leadership, like EVE teaches you leadership fairly well, right? And I think
teaches you resilience, teaches you a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. But for like military, like that might be the reason why we see so many people from the military in the game, is because that, the organizations are kind of built like military organizations, but then also the leadership aspect, right? So you can work yourself up the rank. Now, the rank is maybe a little bit more imaginary, right? It's not as official, step by step by step. Maybe in some groups it is, I don't know. But there certainly is this aspect, right? That, some real leadership skills you have to develop. And then the more trust you gain, the more numbers you get in fleet, the more you can do, right? And
it's a very organic process, yeah.
Yeah. And I think probably if you were like an officer in the US Army or whatever, you probably would profit from an experience like this, like just experience-wise, because they don't get to lead on like a significant level all day, every day. You know what? You know what I mean?
They're not going to make officers have actually used like OPSEC in EVE Online to train people in like what OPSEC means.
Oh, really? I didn't know
stuff
that.
Like that.
But like what I mean is like before Miranda jumps in here and fucking corrects me. What I'm trying to say is like the significant decisions. It's not daily business in any, like, hopefully in most scenarios, because if you have to decide about life and death all day, that's that's not a good thing. But in most situations, in most roles and leadership, it's not, you don't get as much real training. And
no, well, there isn't a way to train leadership. Yeah. You have to learn it. Like you have to just employ your leadership skills until you gain leadership skills. There is no magic switch. There is no magic course that's going to suddenly turn you into some sort of alpha leader personality. You've got to gain that confidence. Yeah. I've been playing this game since I was 12 years old, and it's fucking shaped me as a human being. I started FCing when I was age 14. I have FC'd. That's probably like the longest hobby I've ever had in my life. Is the art of talking to a bunch of nerds in an internet video game and directing them to victory and or failure, depending on how that day feels like going. And it's an experience I'm very happy for, I will say,
Yeah, I mean, there's some moments, right, where you just like go, like those fuck yeah moments. I'm sure you had a few of those, right? They pay back all that struggle. Like if you struggle for a while and you get there and then finally you get something done. For example, you take a doctrine and you prove it works, right? And you get that epic fight and you win. Like, yeah. Like what was, like, do you have any of those? Like a good story?
I think pretty much everyone who's heard me talk on podcasts before probably knows about it, but it's the DTAC G fight against Pandemic Legion during the anime war. So if you don't know, DTAC G is kind of the historical homeland of CVA. It's basically like the old staging system. We don't stage in there now because there's no point to, but back in the day when our biggest threat was AAA and catch, you know, back in 2013, 2014, when I grew up as a fucking kid, that was where everyone staged. That was where everything came out of. So the Fortizar the Mayor meant quite a lot to all of us. It's a very symbolic thing. It was in its final timer, and we had about a week to prepare. And Pandemic Legion had been successfully using the Boosh Ravens and the Boosh Rogues that you helped to design.
But wait, so aren't they invincible? Why even try?
Yeah, I know. And the solution that I ended up coming up with was to seed little groups of dreadnoughts all around the Fortizar, so that no matter where they boosh to, they would still be in range of some number of long-range dreadnoughts. And we managed to round up in our corp 22 dread pilots, which is enough to volley a Raven in one shot to create 2 of these groups. And we did it in secret in a week, and we positioned it so that we could all log on just as the timer went off, so they would have no time to prep for what we were doing at all, and we would be able to just start knocking Ravens out the sky. And it worked. We actually won a fight against PL. We saved the Fortizar, and that was actually would have been the turning point in the anime war had we actually won it, had certain things not happened.
I mean,
but yeah, they were very, very. It was a very, very fun moment. It was also something where it was almost entirely within my own corporation, and that's a really unique feeling as well, when it is people who you've talked to every day for a couple of years, you know, and you're all getting together to do one big thing, and it works out. It's just unbelievable.
You know, I was mad at you for that Raven article. You remember that one? You made an article explaining the config, and I felt like, yep, he's right in how they are used and why they're strong and why they're hard to counter. Even though I would always argue they're not that hard to counter. You can always, if you have your stuff prepped, for example, let me just say, Fortizars are actually harder to keep booshing than Keepstars, right? Because
and I actually explained that in the article, because it's all about the volume, and it's not a linear equation.
Yeah. So in general, you would always have to make them boosh as fast as you can. So if you prep bookmarks around just like the Ravens would do, right? And you have a doctrine that hits fairly far, you can just, warp always in front of them. So they have to boosh not once, then they're in range, then another time, then they're still in range, and then they have to boosh 3 times. They're always going to end up out of range and stuff, right? So I was always arguing, as long as you have 100 km range and you're in a fairly mobile doctrine, just warp in front of them, and then have them boosh, and then warp in front of them again, and stuff like that. So even with like a standard doctrine like Mutants, you could counter them. But I mean, it takes prep and it takes knowledge. So that knowledge wasn't like present in every group. So I can totally see people complaining, and I see why people have the feeling they're oppressive. But the thing that made me mad about your article was actually that you said like there was a wave of wormhole evictions with Bush Ravens, and it was just one eviction total, right? Just one successful eviction.
I was under the impression there were many more, because people in CCP were telling me that there was a wave of them at the time. Like, do you want to know the real unironic reason that article was originally written? Because it wasn't for the general audience; it was for CCP.
Yeah, was it?
Yeah. Do you want to know why it was written? Because someone in CCP told me that it wasn't possible to boosh a hick with a bubble up.
Oh no!
They just told me that this doctrine didn't work. That a fundamental conceit of a doctrine that hundreds of people are using every day didn't exist, and I had to be like, "Excuse me, what?"
But at the same time, so we always use the hick for like that extra layer of protection, right?
Because it's what makes it really, really. It's what gives you the defensive flexibility, so that even if you do mess up a tiny bit, you don't immediately get caught. That was kind of the problem with it.
Only
and that's why I was
bubble-proof
like,
stuff.
hey, let's remove Hicks from the jump equation, and then hey, maybe there's a chance someone can get interceptors or assault frigates or something on top of the Ravens. That gives you a bit more risk, but it doesn't completely destroy the doctrine, because I liked what it did. I really do like the high skill cap, and I think that CCP made the wrong change by turning it to a 25 cap. I do believe that.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to complain about the change anymore. I mean, I did it a few times. Like, I'm just gonna come across like a whiny bitch. It's like I don't want to dive into it. But you know what? What would have been one counter too? That would have been so hard to deal with in a Bush Raven fleet. It's just a cloaky bomber with a scram in front of the fleet, and then you just time it. You warp a hostile fleet just in that general direction. They will start the Bush, and you just scram that anchor quickly. And then what? You know what happens then? All the Ravens boosh in front, and then they all turn around because that anchor is behind them. And then you warp on top of them. And then what are you going to do? If you boosh, you don't know where you're going to end up. You don't know if you're going to boosh everyone. You don't know anything, really. It's complete chaos. And if a Bush Raven fleet has chaos, that's it.
Oh yeah, it's like the equivalent of a Greek phalanx. Like it relies entirely on its formation, and if the formation ever falls, the whole thing disintegrates immediately. But yeah, that was definitely one of my favorite fights. We then had a much bigger one later on in BTEC-W, but PL didn't engage because we had like 50 dreads or something on grid, and Legacy was there with supers ready to come in, and that was actually the point at which I thought we'd won that war. That was the point at which I was like, oh shit, we actually might win this thing. But then unfortunately, and then half the alliances of Prover Block left to join Legacy, and our relationship with Legacy soured somewhat due to political actions from senior members in Provi Block leadership. And as such, we were no longer able to acquire super capital cover. So we were basically dead in the water versus Panfam, because obviously we didn't have supers of our own. So they could just escalate. Well, they could just, not that they were going to drop supers on us, not that PL would do that, because they didn't have them deployed down there, but their capital forces were just exponentially bigger than ours. You know, we were going to form 50 to 60 dreads max. They could drop 120 on us, and there was no way you compete with that.
Yep.
At the end of the day, we were a weaker force. There's, you know, you've got to have something there to tip it back in your favor. And the threat of Legacy dropping the super capital hammer was what we had after we kind of acquired that in 3D TAC. And after that went away and we lost like half of our forces, that was pretty much game over. And that's why I actually left probably at that point, because I was like, hey, we need to retreat to low sec. We can't handle this anymore. That was not the decision that Alicia wanted to make. So I decided, okay, well, I'll just resign, because I don't want to fight a war that has been lost due to circumstances outside my control, basically.
Yeah, and I get that. You know, if you're forced into a war, you know, into pointless, like if someone is almost demanding you to burn yourself out for nothing, right? That's just pointless. And that's what a war in the end really is, right? If you have like two fairly equal numbers, then it's all about who burns out first.
Who can keep it? I think I prefer to see it in a different light, because I think that paints even a very negative kind of framing. Like a lot of people have always said, oh, Eve's about who can stop your enemy from logging in. You know, that's how you win wars. You stop your enemy from logging in. No, I like to see it from the other way. You win a war by keeping your players logging in. You win a war by making your players not burn out, by keeping things fun for them.
It still has a little bit of a It still has a little bit of a negative undertone, though, right?
I
you
think
win by keeping your guys logged in.
Eve's a fucking bastard game. Like let's not beat around the bush. All of us.
But it is true.
Evil.
But it is true. It's never the ISK or any, like I don't remember any war that was just won by ISK. The ISK war hits the morale to a degree, right? Because Lyman, they will always look at that like, oh, we traded like 50 bill to 20 bill. That's great. Or the other way around, that's not so great. So it's gonna hit the morale. It's all about the morale in the long run, right? So
it can buy you a lot of morale, though, as someone in chat is saying with World War B. Like ISK can substitute for morale for a certain degree, but even if you give out free ships, if you're just losing constantly, no one's gonna join.
But at the same time, though, I mean, that's totally true. World War B was won by ISK. I wouldn't say that, like, maybe to a degree, right? But not 100%. It wasn't like all about the ISK. I wonder what would have happened without the ISK. Like if he would just, like, if it was just said like, okay, we're making this like big thing, and you can be part of this. Like if you sell it correctly, it still would happen, and it could still snowball and then develop into what it was. But there was a couple ingredients that had to be right for that to happen, right? Like people had to be fed up with the situation, and there needed to be a lot of people at the right, in the right mindset at the time.
I mean, I don't think it would have happened at all without the low sec Voltron. That's something I touched on my latest video, actually. Like the fact that the Imperium was shown to be able to bleed was very important, because people don't remember quite how invulnerable. I actually don't like calling that version of the Imperium, by the way. I prefer to call that version of the Imperium the CFC. I prefer to kind of make the distinction of 2016 being the transition from the CFC to the Imperium, because you do lose a lot of the old school CFC alliances like Space Monkeys and oh god, there's so many like shit tiered like hangers on I can't remember. They'll come to me in a minute. FCON, alliances like that have been with them for 4 or 5 years at that point, and after they move down to delve again and they start to rebuild and become the super capital kind of supremacy focused coalition, that's what I call the Imperium. I recognize that's probably not something that's going to jive well with the Mittani, but whatever.
No, I think you're right.
I get to write the history, not him.
Well, who controls the past controls the present, right? And so on. And who controls the present controls the future, right? So it's like, you have some power on your hands there, I think.
Yeah.
But I think you're on point there, right? Even though it was rebranded earlier, but that kind of cut it off, and it's like, I would call it the CFC, and then later on the Imperium. But yeah. But what alliance do you like? What alliance you were in was probably the most fun or the best experience for you? You'd say, is it CVA?
It's still CVA. Yeah, it was still CVA. As much as I didn't enjoy the end of my time there, I did have a ton of fun, like FCing with them. The line members were some of the best. Pentag Blade is still one of the best corp I've ever been a part of. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't really gel well with the initiative. I think is because the corp I was in was like half of the people from my old corporation, and it was nice and it was great to be with friends for a while. But the problem with being with those kind of friends is that you realize what the other people who didn't follow you brought to kind of that dynamic. They've gone on to do some great things. I think they're still a corporation. They're still out there with Godless Horizon now doing awesome small gang stuff. But yeah, I still look wistfully upon those days,
Yeah. What was the corp name again? I forgot.
Pentag Blade.
And no, the one that wasn't in it.
Oh, shit. I don't remember the actual corp name. We were with the Godless Horizons for a while. Oh, Escalated?
Escalated, correct, yeah. So, like, Escalated was always, like, whenever they were around and they had numbers, they were, like, super cool and, like they did cool shit. But I always felt like they were lacking the numbers and activity. So I always felt like something is missing there, right? So that might just be the guys that didn't come with them that could have, made all the difference there.
Yeah, losing people like Fardender and Vishnogradsky was a really big blow. They were like some pretty top, they're some pretty top tier FCs basically. Not quite FCs, but they're the kind of people who fill support roles that helps you to run fleets. Like Vish was just a great subcap FC straight up. Fard was amazing at handling bombers, amazing at handling E-War, amazing at handling caps. He didn't like to really FC main fleets at all, but yeah. Also, Laska leaving sucked. Laska's a great dude.
Yeah, I got to know Laska quite a bit.
Yeah.
I
actually convinced him to start recording his fights, because he originally wasn't recording his Dread fights. I'm really happy for him. Like his YouTube channel is absolutely blown up. It's one of the biggest ones out there.
Yeah, Laska. Like I think when Hardreds got introduced into the game, he was probably maybe not the first guy. I don't know who was the first, but he was like doing almost nothing else, right? Just Hardreds all day.
He was the guy who figured out how to use them the best, I think. Like he was also in a situation in Provi where at the time we were getting roamed very heavily by a lot of small gangs, and it was just the perfect. And people also weren't afraid of the Horde Dreads at that point, so it was kind of the perfect moment to start making that kind of content. You got some amazing fights.
That always plays a big role. When people don't know yet how strong it is, that's where you get the best. And then you have to capitalize on it too, right? It's like the same with doctrines. For example, when we first took out Stukas and like did the first bomb runs, even on Munins and stuff like this, we had to learn it, sadly. We had to learn it first. Because at the beginning, everyone was like, oh, it's just bombers. Let's warp on 0, warp into this bubble. And like, if only I would have learned all those lessons already, oh my god, that would have been so good. But slowly but surely, we had to learn this. I mean, we had success with them, obviously, but you know, if you can capitalize on it early, that's the moment, right? So, but what about the Zappy boys? Are they gonna be strong? And then you can go and capitalize on them, and nobody expects them to be strong. Like, is that gonna be a thing?
I feel like there probably is some use case for them. I just don't think we see it right now. Like I've done the maths, and it does look like if all of the things bounce to like reasonable targets. So, for example, if you're in the Thunder Child, you're fighting like Maelstroms, or you're fighting a Baddens, it makes sense. Like, you're doing more DPS than they're doing. In theory, you will eventually trade to victory because people aren't going to be repping that incidental damage. The problem is they just aren't very good individually. Like, they just lack the tracking. They lack a lot of the things that makes the Triglavian ships overly good in solo versus fleet fights. Because we can all agree that trig ships are way better in smaller gang than they are in larger gang. That's just the nature of how their mechanic works. And I feel like the Edencom ships might be the opposite of that.
Yeah, I think I think the big problem with them is the application. Because like if you look at the battleships, in theory you would have enough DPS to kill other ships, right? No big deal. Like, I think it has like 400, 500 DPS. You can work with that just as if it was a normal battleship or a normal whatever ship. But the thing is, it doesn't apply all that well, right? It applies like cruise missiles. So, is it gonna be viable? I guess we're gonna see. Like, I don't know how long it takes to skill it. Doesn't take that long, but how expensive are those ships gonna be for now, right? So
right now they're looking at about 2-ish times to 3-ish times T1. So you're looking at the Thunder Child being about 600 mil versus a 200-ish mil.
That's not too crazy. So I guess the price
we'll see it go down over the next couple of months as well. Yeah.
So maybe we'll see like 100-man Thunderchild fleets, and then you can see some effect, because you have to go with mass on these, right?
So, yeah, my guess would actually be that we see the Stormbringer come out first. Just because I've seen some people have shown me that some people have said to me that it works. Like, it isn't that slow. It's got a lot of things that can make it work really well as a skirmish cruiser. It just needs to come down to about a 100 mil. And then it'll be decent as potentially like a counter to Caracals and stuff like that. Although everything really counters Caracals. And you're not going to use a 100 million-esque ship to counter Caracals anyway. But, like, I don't know. I like the mechanic. The mechanics feels like it should work. It feels like the same kind of scaling theory that is why I love having a couple of firewall ships in every one of my fleets over like 60, 70 dudes. Because you can always just use that AoE damage to do something. Even if it's just sit on top of the enemy fleet and make them spam a bunch of need shields tags, it's still really useful. And I feel like at some point...
Have an ECM burst on it too, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, people underestimate how incredibly annoying that is and effective it is, honestly.
Yeah. And then if comms discipline isn't great in a hostile fleet, right? Then there's always that loud guy, oh, ECM bursted, right? And then another guy's like, me too. And then it's like, shut up. It's all right. Like, keep relocking, guys. Don't lose your mind.
Play the fucking game. Don't talk about it.
But yeah.
No, disrupting enemy fleets is definitely the most fun, though. Like, that is absolutely Like my favorite way to play EVE Online is very aggressively and with a very big focus on messing up whatever your opponent's trying to do. Like I've always loved E-War for that reason. My favorite doctrine of all time is the Armor Phantasms, which is, you know, it's got like 30k EHP, but by God, you're gonna damp some things.
Yeah, you know what? I always thought armor nightmares would also be fairly effective.
They did get used actually for a little bit, just post World War B, back when people were using the Boltec plus APOC fleet.
All right.
People were using the Nightmares as E-War carriers to carry like a bunch of paints and stuff.
Well, it makes sense. I always like, for example, if you see like big scale fleets, like let's, for example, in our case, it's like goons are forming, Init is forming, and then maybe, I don't know what other friendlies we would have right now. So we have like two or three friendly fleets, and then NC, Horde, maybe Snuff, some other guys are forming. And then most of the time, everyone brings like the same kind of things, which is Munins, Feroxes, that kind of stuff. And I would always argue the approach that Init and Goons have right now is bringing Sacrileges and Zealots. And the advantage is always the Evo in the midst, right? Because if our fleet is not getting hit, at least we are helping the Goon fleet, for example, to tank by a plan or Evo, right? So our their survivability goes up by our presence, which is just the strength of Evo, right? So I believe like in those big scenarios, in those big fleet fights, Evo plays a big role that people might be underestimating at the moment.
I think people in general just underestimate it, but some of that might just be due to the fact that it is very, very hard to get line members to use it properly. Like fundamentally, it is one of the things that line members have to learn and use their brain about, and that is what makes using Evo a bit more of a difficult proposition.
You know what? I tried actually to go to the next level with Evo application, which is so what I try to do is have a wing of 23 squads, and then 23 is because you have 23 different tags you can use, right? So everyone in such a wing, in such a squad, like let's say you're in squad A, you would just tag how many Evo mods you have on those targets, so the spread is perfect, you know what I mean? Or almost perfect. I took some fights with them up north when we were helping GOTG or Deadco at the time, but we didn't, we didn't get the fights we could test it on. Once I fought fucking Domies, good luck Evoing Domies. And then one time we fought just so outnumbered that, you don't get any usable data from it.
Evo looks so bad when you're outnumbered, though. That's the problem. Like, when you're outnumbered, Evo is like, why the fuck did we bring this? It's so pointless.
Yeah. I did try it a few times, and I still think it probably works really well. And we did some training sessions even, right? So I always feel like people want to be a little bit challenged. They want to be active, doing stuff, think about it. And so I explained it all in detail, and we did some training sessions, and I believe it actually worked. But if you're outnumbered too much, like, you still lose people, and as soon as this falls apart, that's the problem with Evors.
Evo doctrines inherently rely on that Evo to be being active to most enemy ships to work. That's kind of the problem with them.
Yeah,
like the second you lose that numerical parity is the second ship start to die, and that cascades very, very quickly.
Yeah, and that was the problem there. Like, I didn't get the right fight to really test it, but I still believe it probably would work really well, right? And even if people are not 100% with it, you would still get a way better spread of Evo than you would in normal cases. And yeah, I think people would I think they enjoyed it, that they're like a little bit more challenged. So yeah, I think it's always an advantage to a degree, right? If you rely too much on everyone making the right decision, you're not gonna have a good time. But if you give them a little bit of, a little bit of extra room,
you want to be encouraging people to be playing properly. Yeah, people find that fun in general, I think. it's just hard. It's just hard to like make the judgment of like how skilled are the people I'm flying with, can they handle this, and see kind of going from there. But it is fun.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And I mean, sorry.
sorry.
No, sorry.
We're getting into like in the last bit here. Do you want to switch over to talking a little bit about content creation?
Yeah, sure. Like, go ahead.
We wanted to say some stuff about that. Yeah. Just wanted to. You've got a couple of questions down here, like you know, how much research goes into the video, and I want to actually twist that back and put it onto you. Like, how much work goes into producing these kind of FC videos and finding the right people to talk to for each time?
Oh, I mean, to be quite honest, research-wise, I don't even research all that much. I kind of know most people, right? Sometimes I have people on that I don't know at all, and then I ask general questions and stuff like this, and then kind of try to figure out where to go, and it can be a challenge. Right? I learned a couple of things doing this, and I'm sure, like, you've done plenty of podcasts yourself. Like, some podcasts are a challenge, but most of the time, it's very easy to talk to people. Like, for example, in your case, I knew I don't have to research all that much. I just write down a couple points, right? So, like, in case I get lost, like, oh, what could we talk about? Like, but I didn't even need them so far. Like, I have the notes open. I think we talked about a couple of those things, and it just, it's easy to get together. But
we
like,
kind of get
in general, it's not that much.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm just interested in what goes into this, because obviously streaming is a very, very different type of content creation to what I do.
Yeah, I mean, there's advantages to YouTube. Obviously, you can sit down, talk to the guy, and you can cut some stuff out if you really need to, which I think is probably rare, right? But I mean, you're very much in control what you upload, right? In my case, like, wherever it goes, it goes, right? I kind of like that though.
Twitch, I think Twitch and YouTube are very different, because Twitch is effectively what you're trying to do on Twitch is you're trying to keep people engaged with your content for a long period of time. And to do that, you also need to produce a lot of content. Whereas with YouTube, you're trying to produce a much more condensed point. You're trying to, because what actually matters stats-wise, back-end-wise in YouTube is less the raw amount of hours viewed and more the percentage of your content that gets viewed. So it's much more beneficial for me to have a video where someone watches 70% than a video where someone watches for 2 hours and it's 10% of the video or something, just to use a kind of ridiculous example.
Yeah, the thing is, like, for example, the whole army people leadership thing that I talked about earlier, that was actually one of the things where I thought, like, it should be a video, like there's like, you could make a video about leadership and Eve and all that stuff, and it wouldn't be the right thing for like Twitch. Like it's sometimes, like in this case, it just fit in and I just brought it up. But in general, right, there's some stuff that deserve a video where you need to have like your point proper worked out, and you can't just wing it, right? In your case, for example, the political stuff, people would probably get mad at you if you get some stuff wrong.
People get mad at me every now and again. Yeah, I got some feedback from my last episode already, because I called something an armor timer that was actually an anchoring timer, because the Fortizar turned on during the middle of the fight and started shooting things. So I saw it on the BR and I was like, okay, well, it's on the BR and it's shooting things. And I checked the system. Okay, the Fortizar hasn't died. So this must have been an armor timer, because no one defends the shield timer. Boom, put it in the video. Obvious, don't need to check this at all. And then someone shouted at me for getting it wrong. So that's the kind of nuances that you got to worry about. But yeah, you're entirely right. Like, I script out all of my videos. I'm normally collecting the points throughout the couple of weeks in between videos. Like, so I'll collect battle reports, links to posts on Reddit. I'll talk to some of the FCs involved sometimes if I have the chance to do that and I know them, and kind of get their lowdown perspective on it and the nuances that mattered. And then after that, I'll create a whole script, and then you got to go through that and record all of that, which is a step that I think people underestimate. Try and read like 3,000 words of text in a row without making a mistake. and you will realize suddenly that it is not as easy as you think it is, unfortunately.
And then you also want to wanted to come across like you're bringing up the point the first time. You know what I mean? Like you don't want to just read it. You
Oh no,
want
yeah, you've got to
you want
actually
to get
put
it
some
across.
emotion into it, yeah.
Yeah. So
Which is also hard. Like you definitely develop like a sort of radio voice.
yeah, which is that's one of those things also with podcasts. Like there's some real skills that people I think underestimate, but it's good fun to learn it too, right?
Oh,
It's like,
absolutely. Like it's such an interesting thing to learn. Video production, been able to get tips from so many people. You'd be surprised how many like good editors and that play Eve as well, and people will reach out with you and try and help you out, which is always lovely.
someone says, I like pandas after the fleet where went wrong if he loses. Yeah. Why would you say when he loses? Like I never lose any fleet ever, right?
Yeah,
No,
that's
but yeah.
that's what these FCing videos are basically. It is just me going, hey, here's what I did wrong. Here's me pausing at times I make mistakes, explaining why I'm making the mistake and how you can avoid it.
You know
Yeah,
what's
I
the
think
funniest? You know what's the funniest thing? When we have a fleet, and it might be a good one, might be a bad one, who knows? But some mistakes were made. Then on the way home, I already start analyzing, and people always think like, "Oh no, he's not mad, but like he's
emo raging is the old term.
no, raging. Like I never rage, but people say like, cheer up, like." Guys, don't get me wrong. That's how I process this, right? It's like
No,
I kind of like this, and people always get it wrong, thinking, "Oh no, like he's sad," and like it was a decent fleet though, guy. Like, and it's like whatever, right? And then
that is what the term emo raging is. Emotional, just like kind of being really sad after a fight because you feel like you've lost or you didn't do everything perfectly, and that was just a term in the olden days of like Kugu shit posting.
But I like analyzing the fights right after. I have to say though, it's the same with like I think if I would make a video or whatever, I would struggle just as much as bringing all the points I want to bring up in the video or in the stream that I would have if I wasn't streaming. If you know what I mean? Like it's not always like you're not gonna be always on point. Analyzing it on the spot, and when you thought about the fight, you had like tons of ideas, like this and that and so on. But if you rewatch it and then suddenly analyze it on stream, there's like I don't know, there's like that spontaneous thing missing. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's even harder to go back afterwards on stream than like on the way home. That's why I like to do it like just fresh. It's still in your mind. You still know exactly every decision you made and why. So that second, I still have it in my mind. So that's why I like to do the analysis thing right after the fleet instead of waiting a week and then making a video about it. Because then I feel like some of that information is already lost, right? Why did I make this call? Who said what at what time? All these little things, they're all missing suddenly. And then I feel like it could be, if I would make it a video, it could be a little bit flat, like a little hollow. You know what I mean?
It kind of lacks the clarity of you knowing like, this is the point at which I felt like I lost control of the fight.
Exactly.
Because you do remember, you do not like, that is something that you don't quite retain. But that's also such a weird feeling to try and describe to people, though, because people ask like, "How did you know that this was the point at which you lost the fight?" And you're like, "I don't know. It just I just know from experience that this is the point at which there was no. I've never come back like it. Therefore, yeah.
Felt like it. Maybe because it felt like it. That's why you lost the fight. That's another question you have to then ask.
Orientated, yeah.
Yeah, maybe you were just too. I had some of those fights before where I thought like, hey, maybe we should have taken this fight right away, right then and there, and it would have been fine. Or just work it out. But because I felt like, no, I've seen this too many times, and I warp out. It's the second you warp out, the fight is basically over, right? So, it happens. It happens.
It does. That's FCing though. FCing is just a it's just a game of making up for your mistakes every time, basically.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important part of FCN is the whole theory crafting, not necessarily, but like analyzing what you did wrong. What can you do next time? Some people do it more obvious, maybe, or more open, like I do, and some other people might just not say anything to anyone, and they already have it in their mind what they're gonna do next time, just subconsciously, or like they make the adjustments next time anyway, right? So they don't even have to go through all this process anyway.
I would dispute that what you're talking about though isn't theory crafting though.
No, that's what, like,
yeah, like thinking about different ways you could have structured your fleet and thinking about different ways that you could have organized your like command or organized your fleet or set up your fleet or made sure you had certain ships or make sure you had certain people in fleets. That is all theory crafting. People don't think of it as, people think theory crafting is just staring at Python for like 5 hours and trying to make the most optimized Rifter you can. And that's just not what it is. Like, it is the combination of like, okay, here is a thing that I've made in Python, comma, now how does it apply in real life? How does it turn? How does it move? How can I use people on the grid to increase the effectiveness of this? People don't think about even simple things like, having stop bubbles. Having good stop bubbles took years and years for people to think about how to use them properly. You don't think about that, but like the idea of using nightmares and setting up defensive walls of bubbles around you so people can't like warp in on you at 0. That's a very recent invention that came out in about 2016. People
it takes skill.
Think of it. Yeah.
I bet people thought about it, but at the same time, people thought like, I need enough good dictator pilots to make that happen, and I probably don't have them, so I'm not gonna bother even trying. So I think that's probably a big factor.
And now it's like the go-to doctrine for every small like nullsec alliance. Like you see Forsaken Empire using them, you see Trigger Happy using them, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, yep, we're using them too, I guess.
Mm-hmm. They're really good though. I do love nightmares. That was definitely my favorite doctrine to fly when I was in Provi, because I brought the nightmares to Provi before they came to the rest of the game. We were the first block to start using them. I didn't come up with the fit. I can't claim that. Some dude in Waffles came up with the fit that I objectively stole from him. But yeah, we were the first people to really start using them back when everyone else was using either rattlesnakes or Macarials.
No, they're really strong. Fun,
they're really good, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the big advantage is always like they're so mobile, so they're very hard to pin down. And then even if you lose the fight, it's very hard to lose the entire fleet too, right? Which is always a problem with like Armor Max, for example. If you take a fight with Armor Macarials, you're not gonna get out of all the fights.
I've definitely lost an entire fleet of nightmares in my time, but that was thanks to a lot of Tech 3s with a lot of scrams. That was less fun, but you learn stuff from that.
Equally, I don't miss those days.
Yeah, I don't either. Those AHACs were pretty strong.
Yeah, OP Tech 3s, nope.
It was very fun when you refitted your nightmares to pulse lasers and heavy newts, though. That was very fun. I did enjoy that. I absolutely wrecked a Loki fleet doing that once. It was glorious. We killed 12 Archons.
Well, the T3 days might be over, like, in general, but I think like Loki still got like a good couple use cases. And isn't there talk about
Legions
like
still used heavily in wormholes as well, from my understanding?
Yeah, so like I mean, Volta has been using Legions, but I haven't seen them around all that much lately.
Yeah, like that's just because they're in Veil, where I don't think Legions make sense for them. They're using sacrileges mostly right now.
But what happened to Volta in general? Do you know?
Yeah, they're deployed in Hakonin right now. They're engaging in Veil of the Silent.
I think actually, not as that you say it. I think Sutonio was actually streaming yesterday. He mentioned that.
Yeah, but, they're all deployed up there, and they're kind of helping Forsaken Empire, but also just being Volta, so they'll shoot them if they don't get anything else to do.
For a while, it looked like Volta would like blow up into like some massive group, right? Like they were growing and growing. It felt like. But for some reason, it kind of stopped. I don't know what happened there.
I don't really know there either. I'm not particularly privy to their internal politics. I know that they've like nearly disbanded at certain points as well. If you remember when they were in the HRE, because they plus Skill U plus Hard Knocks were the people who originally took over the northeast of the game from the DRF, and Volta basically died during that, because once they'd taken all the space and started renting Empire, Volta just collapsed in activity, and they nearly ceased to exist. And they eventually reformed the actual alliance that exists now. But there was a couple of shaky months there where it looked like they could die. So who really knows?
Yeah, renting empires. We could go on about that one for hours too, probably.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in Vale of the Silent, though. Triumvirate just deployed there as well. It looks like Vale is the new Providence, now that Providence is the place for blocks to actually battle for some reason. I don't know. I do love it now that it's like a Legacy and PanFam and just outright fighting constantly in Providence.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff happening in Providence. I don't know. Like, also, there was a stream from Talking at Stations about what's wrong with Providence, I think it was called. And there was some drama going on or whatever. Like, and you have drama in every alliance. Like, as soon as you have a certain side, there will be drama. Like, how bad the drama will be, I don't know, but there will always be some drama. But it seemed like there's some serious shit going on. And like, do you have any like context still there? Do you know what's going on there?
Yeah, they're like Provi during my time there has basically never really moved on from the early like 2008 to 2011-ish ways of organizing a coalition, where you just have alliances that live in vaguely the same region and are blue, and that is all the structure you really have, apart from like comms. So there's
Right.
there's like, I don't know if they've updated it by now, but when I was there was no coalition SRP, there was no coalition tax rules, no coalition like here's where you make your money. There was no standing comms. There's basically no organization at all, and I tried to kind of get through that, but there was just so much organizational resistance in Province. I don't think you're ever going to do it. Provi is just very, very resistant to modernization because they don't really have to. Especially CVA, and CVA makes a lot of the decisions, if not all the decisions, for Providence. So you end up with this constant drama from the smaller Providence groups that want things to get better or want to be in a more modern situation, and CVA, which isn't really incentivized to do so, because every time CVA gets booted from the region, they absorb all of the corps and members from the people who want to stay in NRDS from those smaller alliances, and then they just retake the space like 3 months later, whenever whoever invaded them gets lost, because they know that CVA can handle losing their space, because CVA is a very old and very well run in its own way alliance. It's not going to just randomly fail Cascade. Whereas a lot of these smaller alliances, they actually, if they get kicked out of Providence, there is a good chance that those alliances cease to exist. So there's kind of a divergence of priorities that's just naturally inbuilt into the coalition, and that just always leads to drama. And I think it always will, especially when outside forces do attempt to leverage this, which is what we kind of saw with, I don't know if they talked about it at all in the podcast, but there are rumors that have come to me from multiple sources that Rocket X offered Providence a ceasefire, basically terms to like stop attacking them. And
All right.
apparently that was
price?
not well received by CVA, so that's not happening.
Rocket X and the guys. I mean, that's basically those are PanFam affiliated people, right? So, I mean, if it was just Rocket X and what's the group called again? Seto is in there, isn't he?
No, I think he left now, didn't he?
Oh, he left already.
But I thought he joined Horde, but I could be wrong there. Who knows? Yeah, it's Wrecking Crew is the
Wrecking
coalition.
Crew. Yeah. So Wrecking
Those guys
Crew
have been active in that area for so long, but they've just slowly built up to become a force that is just able to contest Provi at this point.
Yeah, they're quite big, right? But if it was only Wrecking Crew, I think would probably handle it, right?
If you go by like the history of them fighting, the problem is that Wrecking Crew has a significant super capital and capital advantage over Provi. So in a lot of their engagements, they're able to win by leveraging that, basically. I don't think we can really know though what the natural order of things is in Providence, just because at the end of the day, if Provi pushes too hard, Wrecking Crew are always going to bat for Panda Fam, and if Wrecking Crew push too hard, they will, probably were always going to bat phone Legacy. That's just how it worked.
Yeah, it's similar to your situation before, right? With PL.
Yeah, similar. Yeah, very similar to it actually. It's kind of just a slow continuation of the anime war, in a certain way.
Yeah.
I mean, in fact, Wrecking Crew getting Sov there was a direct result of the anime war. They took Sov during it, and they just and Provi has never been able to take it back after however many years.
Someone says Seto didn't join Horde. He left Rocket's alliance to start his own alliance, spent a week FC in Horde fleets whenever Star Pilot was away.
Oh, okay.
I might have...
Sorry.
Yeah, I might have Seto on again. He actually asked about it like the other day. Because I think the last time I had him on was... half a year ago or something. I don't even know. It's been a while. I've been running this for quite a while. Actually, Monday, it's going to be the 1 year anniversary of me streaming. So,
hey, congrats.
Nothing special planned, but yeah, there you go.
You've been keeping up to a schedule for a long, long time too. I got to give you respect for that. That's hard.
The schedule, that's the only thing. The FC chat schedule, I kept with it. But the normal streams, I can't keep up with it because... then there's a strat timer here, then there's a timer there, there's a fleet out, there's rockets to be saved. There's always something in the way, so it's almost impossible for me to keep the normal stream schedule up. But I'm trying my best usually. So yeah. And
I actually have to say that I really regret putting my suit on for this because it is absolutely baking in my room right now, and I'm sweating like a dog.
Well, then take it off, I guess. I don't even own a suit at the moment.
You can't. How do you not own a suit? You got to.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But yeah, I need to get a good suit.
Get an initiative themed suit.
Maybe not.
You can get them cheap. You can get a cheap one and just get it embroidered. It'd be sick. When we actually finally have events back, you get the initiative. The initiative can finally level up the swag game from hoodies.
Everyone shows up in a suit.
Yeah, everyone shows up in an initiative suit.
That would be a good one. Yeah, that's true. And you know what? Brisk would support that 100%.
Brisk would very much support that. Brisk would be on top of that.
Imagine.
Brisk could hook you up with a good tailor.
I'd be up for that. I need a suit anyway, so PJ is already getting me yoga pants for the stream, so I can stream with a whiteboard, right? But yeah, I had one point that I wrote down actually. I almost lost it, or I lost the train of thought, but I want to bring it up anyway. One thing that FCs might underestimate, and you mentioned the theory crafting part, what actually goes into theory crafting. I think having your MOTD and the doctrine and all that stuff sorted out for people to see, either be it on the forums wherever your alliance uses it, or whatever, or in game. I like to use it in game because people can just join fleet and click and they have all the fits and all that stuff. I think that's one aspect that people underestimate. And I just wanted to bring it up because I had it written down, but I didn't want to interrupt you. And yeah,
that's totally right. I would recommend that aspiring FCs just make an MOTD before fleets, and if people ask you questions more than twice, put the fucking answer to it in the MOTD. That's been my MO for my whole FCing career. If someone asks you a question more than twice, that means that there are probably 10, 15 people who want to know that question, but aren't going to ask you it.
Yeah.
So if you present them the information right away, it's going to make things a lot easier for them.
Yeah, I take good pride in my MOTDs. I'm always trying to have them on point so people can rely on it. And over time, maybe not the first time, maybe not the first 10 times, people will look actually at the MOTD, but
But they
At
never
some-
do.
Yeah,
They never
They
read the
never-
OTD.
You'll never have all the people look at it, but at a certain time, like after like 100 fleets, you would expect people. So 90% of people will actually look at it, and it's like there's grades, like fleets profit greatly from it. I think it's like very underestimated. And I always think like Darkshines, who you know probably too. He's running like big fleets and stuff, and he has always the shittiest MOTDs, right? It just says like Alpha comms, we're in abundance, and like it might not even be an Alpha comms, you know what I mean? It's like, dude, come on, you can do better. And at least for the doctrines that I post and stuff, I make MOTDs, and then he usually goes and says, "Hey, Pano, you got that MOTD? Can I save it?" And then I invite him, and he saves my MOTD. But,
like
yeah.
that, like that fucking meme. Hey, y'all got any more of that free crack?
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, MOTDs. If you want to FC, that's one of the things you can easily do right the first time. So there you go. And
yeah, well, thank you for having me on, Pando. I really appreciate it. It's great to talk to you.
Was about to say, and thanks for coming on. Great job with the YouTube channel, and yeah, keep it up.
Yeah, great job with the Twitch stuff, and I look forward to listening to your next episode of this.
Yeah,
always enjoy them.
You know what? I asked Kenda, who seems to be getting
He's
more
resurfacing.
Active. Yeah,
he's like a fucking demon from the swamp. He's coming.
But he said he needs to be more active in the next like for a month or so, and then he wants to come on. And
totally.
so
I miss that dude. He's a really good FC. You should definitely talk to him when you.
Yeah, not even FC necessarily, but also like just a leader. You know what I mean? There's FCs and then there's leaders. I feel like, and he strikes like a good like. He's good in both, right? Which is rare. Like you have an Elo, for example.
He's terrible at leadership, though. Don't worry about that. He'll tell you that he sucks at it, even though he's
I know. But that makes a good leader. You know what I mean?
You're not wrong.
Yeah, like the guys that, like, for example, on those FC cards, I've got 3 points. You get only 1 point, right? I'm pretty sure it's more than 1 point. Time spent on. It's like I'm on purpose time spent on, right? It's not like how good are you at it, but like how much time have you spent on leadership stuff, right?
Honestly, not that much though. That's kind of the other thing about Providence, is that the military and political leadership is super separated. So I basically had no ability to talk to like the corp CEOs and stuff like that as a milder. I had to go through alliance leadership to talk to corp CEOs, which basically doesn't work because it makes shifting doctrines just impossible.
Yeah.
But that's the point. I just don't enjoy leadership, if I'm honest. I tried it for a while and it just isn't something for me. I just like shooting people in the face with my spaceship lasers.
Same. But sometimes that requires leadership too. You know? Alrighty, then let's call it here. Guys, everyone, thanks for hanging out. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And see you guys on the next one. Oh yeah, and look at the new awesome thanks for watching screen from the X70 fight.
Oh, that is a nice fight.
Oh, just look like in a few seconds, so that the first moment's already over when the ref warps through. But then also you have like 4 of those blue explosions at the same time, which is super rare.
That is the rarest explosion, isn't it? The blue spinny one.
Yeah. Alrighty, guys, I'm muting myself here. See you guys around.